I'm 22, male, and finally about to graduate college. The first in my family, which makes it a pretty big deal. I've put in years of long hours and late nights to get here, balancing school and work to make this happen. I wasn't looking for anything over the top to celebrate, just a small family dinner and some quiet acknowledgement. My parents, on the other hand, seemed way more invested in making a big deal about it, especially since this is a big milestone for our family. Now, there's my younger brother 2 years behind me, who has this habit of hogging attention. Ever since we were kids, he's had a knack for pulling focus back to himself. You name it, birthdays, family holidays, whatever. Somehow, he'd always managed to make it about him. Our parents have always brushed it off, laughing it away as boys will be boys whenever he'd do something to disrupt the day. I learned early on that he had a natural talent for shifting the spotlight. It never sat right with me, but over the years I've learned to brush it off, too. It's not worth picking a fight when they're going to side with him anyway. Leading up to my graduation, my brother's behavior started getting weird. About a week out, he went from being his usual, loud self to sulking and giving one-word answers. He'd disappear into his room for hours and act all closed off, not wanting to join any family conversations about the upcoming ceremony. At first, I thought he might have some end-of-semester stress or something, but then it became clear he was up to something. I brought it up casually to my parents, more like a "hey, have you noticed something's up with him?" kind of question. They didn't seem bothered. My mom's response? He's probably just nervous about your big day. Dad agreed, saying something along the lines of how he was still young, he'd be fine. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was planning something. After all, he has a pretty consistent track record of pulling some stunt whenever the family's focus isn't on him. Things got stranger when he started making vague social media posts about facing challenges and feeling overwhelmed. He even put up one of those dark, moody photos, the kind where you can't quite tell if someone's crying or just staring off dramatically into the distance. His friends started commenting stuff like, "Stay strong, bro, and you got this." I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, but the timing was just too perfect. Here I was, on the verge of achieving something major, and he's suddenly dealing with this struggle he wouldn't name. A few of my friends reached out, warning me that my brother might try to pull something at graduation. I laughed it off, saying no way he'd do that, right? But the thought stuck in my head. With my family, I've learned to expect the unexpected, especially when it comes to my brother. The night before graduation, he was acting even weirder. While my parents and I were discussing the logistics for the next day, where we'd sit, when we'd head out, my brother stayed mostly silent, sitting in a corner, looking tired and drained. Just before he went to bed, he muttered something about not feeling well, barely loud enough for anyone to hear. My mom asked if he wanted to see a doctor, but he brushed it off, saying he'd be fine. I went to bed with this knot of unease in my stomach, trying to focus on what the day was supposed to mean to me. The morning of graduation was no better. My family got dressed, excited and ready, but my brother looked like he'd been up all night. He was pale, sluggish, and coughing here and there, all while putting on this sad, "I'll be fine" act. It didn't go unnoticed by my mom, who kept suggesting that maybe he should stay home if he wasn't feeling well, but he insisted on coming, saying something like he'd never miss his brother's big day, making himself look like the devoted sibling. That just made me feel more on edge. On the way to the ceremony, he continued coughing, each one louder and more dramatic than the last. My parents seemed glued to his every move, glancing back at him every time he so much as sniffled. I was stuck next to him, trying to tune it out, but his performance was hard to ignore. When we arrived at the venue, my parents' attention was split between excitement for my graduation and concern for my brother. He started leaning on them, talking about how exhausted he felt, and making a big show out of even small things, like needing help to get up from his seat. My mom hovered over him, fussing with his collar and asking if he was feeling okay. The more they doted on him, the more obvious it was that my graduation wasn't the only thing on everyone's mind. By the time the ceremony started, I felt this heavy mix of excitement and dread. My brother sat beside my mom, pale and lethargic, every few minutes throwing out a dramatic sigh or cough. It was impossible to fully concentrate on the event because I was waiting for whatever stunt he had up his sleeve. Update 1. The ceremony started, and everything was going smoothly at first. The hall was packed, people were cheering for each graduate, and the mood felt electric. But my brother, sitting just a few seats down from me, was already looking restless. Every few minutes, he'd start with these loud coughs, each one sounding more dramatic than the last. I could see my mom and dad constantly glancing his way, their faces filled with worry. My mom leaned in, asking if he was okay, and he just nodded weakly, putting on this exhausted, pained expression. It was as if he were trying to silently announce that he wasn't feeling well to anyone who'd pay attention. As names were being called, my brother's coughing picked up. He started holding his hand to his chest, and my mom shifted in her seat, looking ready to grab him at any moment. The atmosphere around our seats became tense. I could feel people around us glancing over to see what was going on. My dad leaned in, whispering to my mom, and she just kept her eyes glued on my brother, who now looked even paler under the stage lights. Then, right as my name was about to be called, it happened. My brother staggered to his feet, his face contorted in some kind of dramatic distress. Before anyone could react, he suddenly collapsed, hitting the floor in a way that made everyone around gasp. My mom screamed, practically leaping out of her seat to get to him, while my dad quickly followed, looking panicked. A few people around us jumped up too, trying to help. The announcer was calling my name, but the focus was all on my brother lying on the floor with everyone's attention on his collapse. I ended up walking across the stage without any cheering from my family. I could barely process the moment. The hall, which had been buzzing with applause and celebration, felt different as I crossed. It was as if all eyes were on the small commotion happening around my brother rather than the graduates on stage. I heard faint murmurs and concerned whispers from the audience, and by the time I returned to my seat, my parents were still fussing over him. As the ceremony wrapped up, we filed out into the lobby where people were gathering, congratulating their friends and family. My parents had my brother propped up between them, his arms around their shoulders, looking dazed and weak as they helped him outside. My mom kept asking if he needed a doctor, and he just murmured that he'd be fine, saying something about just needing to rest. They were completely focused on him, and I felt like an extra at my own graduation. When we finally made it home, my brother went straight to bed, looking more exhausted than ever. But by the evening, something strange happened. A video surfaced online of the whole incident at the ceremony, my brother collapsing right as I was about to go on stage. The footage was taken from just the right angle, zoomed in on him, catching every part of his fainting. The friend who recorded it had added some dramatic captions about bravery in the face of health challenges and tagged him in it. People from our family and friends began commenting, pouring out sympathy and encouragement. Hang in there. So brave of you to go to the ceremony even when you weren't feeling well. Some even praised his strength. Seeing that video hit a nerve. It didn't feel like a coincidence that his friend had caught the whole thing on camera so perfectly, almost like it was staged. My friends noticed it too and messaged me, saying the timing seemed off and that he might have planned the whole thing to draw attention. My parents, though, were completely caught up in his health crisis. They started booking doctor's appointments, arranging for tests, and spending hours talking to relatives about his condition. All of a sudden, my graduation felt like a forgotten detail. The next day, my friends, who'd all been supportive through college, reached out, voicing their frustration. They couldn't believe how my family was letting my brother steal the spotlight like this. One of them even joked that I should spill the tea online because it was unreal how my own family was treating my big day as a side note. They told me I should call him out, and honestly, it was tempting. Later, I confronted my brother. I asked if he had planned this, telling him how it looked with his friend recording everything and posting it online. He looked at me, wide-eyed, acting offended, saying he couldn't help it and didn't ask for any of this attention. He claimed that he genuinely felt sick, brushing off my questions as if I was out of line. The more I pushed, the more he acted hurt, insisting he'd never do something so low. My parents kept backing him up, saying he must have been under too much stress, which could have triggered his fainting spell. They wanted me to drop it and be more understanding of his situation. They started looking up specialists, convinced there might be something serious going on with him. Even when the initial tests came back inconclusive, they were talking about second opinions and further tests. Feeling shut out and unheard, I ended up posting the whole thing on Reddit. I wasn't trying to get sympathy, just needed to get it off my chest because my family clearly wasn't going to listen. Within hours, my post blew up. People flooded in, commenting that his timing seemed too perfect, sharing stories of siblings or family members who'd done similar things. It was validating to hear that I wasn't alone, that others saw how messed up this situation was too. The story didn't stop there. A family friend came across my post and sent it to my parents, who weren't happy about me airing family business online. That only made things more tense at home. My dad, at least, tried to talk to me, saying he understood why I felt left out, but he was still cautious about outright siding with me. My mom, though, was furious, saying I should be supporting my brother instead of making everything about me. The tension between us only grew, and I started feeling like a stranger in my own family. Update 2. My post on Reddit picked up steam faster than I expected. Within hours, it went viral, with people chiming in, shocked and outraged at my brother's behavior. They shared their own stories, vented about selfish siblings, and some even gave advice on how to deal with family members who hogged the spotlight. It felt good to see that people understood what I was going through, that it wasn't just me overreacting. The comments flooded in, validating my experience and even offering ways to handle the situation. But the peace didn't last. A family friend saw my post and decided to share it with my parents. By the time I got home, they were waiting for me. My mom looked furious, pacing around the kitchen, while my dad stood there, arms crossed. They were upset, accusing me of airing out family business online. My mom couldn't believe I'd stoop so low as to make my brother look bad in front of strangers. She kept brushing off what he did, saying it wasn't intentional and that he didn't mean to overshadow my graduation. But to me, it felt like they still weren't taking my side. I stood my ground, telling them I needed somewhere to vent because they weren't listening to me at home. I pointed out that every time I tried to talk about my graduation, the conversation would just shift back to my brother and his health crisis. My mom didn't want to hear it, though. She insisted I should take the post down and apologize for embarrassing the family. My dad, on the other hand, stayed quiet for a while, just listening, before he pulled me aside privately. He admitted that he might have overlooked how much this meant to me and how left out I must have felt. Still, he wouldn't fully side with me, not wanting to stir up more drama between me and my brother. While my dad seemed to understand, my brother was a whole other story. He was livid, furious that I had made our family issue public, accusing me of trying to ruin his recovery journey. He went on about how I was undermining his health, making him look like a liar. He talked about his struggle, throwing in big words to make his whole situation sound dire. It felt like he was twisting the story to make himself seem like the victim. As the post continued to gain traction online, more people began questioning his side of things. A few family members, who had initially expressed concern, started asking questions. Some even hinted that he might have exaggerated the whole thing. The public support he'd received started to fade, with a few of his friends unfollowing him and no longer responding to his struggle posts. I could tell he noticed, as he was glued to his phone, checking for updates constantly. This clearly shook him, but he tried to hide it. The tension only got worse after my brother's follow-up doctor's visit. My parents were convinced he might have some serious condition, so they arranged for more tests. But this time, the results showed absolutely nothing. No illness, no underlying issue. Just a perfectly healthy guy who fainted at a graduation ceremony. My mom, though, wasn't willing to let it go. She started rationalizing, saying he'd been under a lot of stress, and that could have caused his dramatic reaction. My dad just looked uncomfortable, not really buying it but not saying much either. From that point, things got more awkward at home. My parents felt caught between my brother and me, not sure who to believe or support. My brother and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was tense. My friends encouraged me to suggest family therapy, saying it might help us get everything out in the open, but I knew my brother wouldn't go for it. I still tried, mentioning it one night at dinner, suggesting we all needed help to move forward and deal with this whole mess. Predictably, my brother scoffed at the idea, saying he was the one who needed support, not therapy. He acted like the whole suggestion was ridiculous, telling my parents that it was just another way I was trying to make him look bad. I could tell my parents were considering it, though, even bringing up the idea of getting him some psychological help to cope with his stress. But my brother brushed it off, saying they were overreacting and told them to drop it. With things spiraling further, I decided to post a follow-up on Reddit, updating everyone on the recent developments. People were just as shocked as I was at how my parents kept excusing his behavior. They pointed out how he seemed to be twisting the narrative, and several suggested I continue setting boundaries to keep my own achievements from being overshadowed again. The comments were a mix of support, disbelief, and advice, but everyone agreed that it was time I put my foot down and didn't let him steal any more of my life's milestones. Being caught between my family's expectations and what was actually happening was exhausting. I kept my distance from my brother, limiting our interactions, and started focusing on things outside the family to keep my head clear. My friends rallied around me, showing their support and helping me cope with how frustrating and isolating it felt to be ignored at home. The support I got online and from my friends gave me a sense of validation that I couldn't seem to find with my family. The family friend who'd shared my post with my parents reached out, awkwardly trying to mediate the situation, as they put it. They suggested I consider my parents' feelings and the family's reputation, but after everything, I felt too drained to keep worrying about what other people thought. With my brother still getting attention from family, I realized that if I wanted to move forward, I'd need to make peace with setting my own boundaries. Despite my brother's attempt to twist the story, people were starting to see through him, and even my parents were beginning to look embarrassed by how he'd handled everything. The drama had gotten more complicated, and though my relationship with my parents wasn't as close as I'd hoped it would be, I felt like I was finally being heard in a way that actually mattered. Update 3. The strain was starting to show, not just at home but in my friendships. My friends noticed how the whole situation had taken a toll on me, and they weren't quiet about it. A couple of them suggested it was time to stand my ground and make my family realize how much this all had cost me. One of my friends, who's known my family for years, said I should push harder to get my parents to acknowledge what I'd accomplished, even if my brother was going through his so-called health issues. It felt like good advice, but I wasn't sure how to make that happen. The turning point came after another tense dinner, where my dad suggested we have a family meeting. He admitted he felt guilty about how everything had played out and thought it might be best for everyone to clear the air. I could tell he was trying to fix things in his own way, but my brother wasn't thrilled with the idea. He argued that all this stress was worsening his condition, making him look and feel weak, and that it wasn't the right time to confront these issues. My mom backed him up, reminding us that he'd been through a lot recently. But my dad was insistent, saying we needed to have this talk as a family. My brother reluctantly agreed, though he made it clear he wasn't happy about it. When we sat down for the meeting, I started by explaining how much this whole thing had affected me. I talked about how overlooked I felt, not just during graduation, but throughout my life, and that I was frustrated about how my brother kept shifting the spotlight away from my achievements. My brother immediately pushed back, rolling his eyes and accusing me of being selfish, saying that I was always making things about myself. This response brought up a lot of old tensions. He reminded me of times when I'd gotten attention from my parents, twisting them into examples of how I was the so-called favorite. Things started to spiral. I found myself getting emotional, the frustration boiling over as I talked about all the times I'd felt overshadowed. It wasn't just about graduation anymore. I told them about birthdays, family events, and small moments that had all somehow turned into episodes focused on my brother. For the first time, I felt like I was saying everything I'd held back for years. My dad finally stepped in, telling my brother that he needed to realize how his actions had affected the rest of the family, especially me. He admitted that he should have paid more attention to my accomplishments instead of getting swept up in my brother's dramas. My dad's words seemed to hit a nerve, but my brother wasn't ready to let it go. He burst out, claiming he was the real victim here, talking about how he always felt like he was playing second fiddle. He said he'd never felt like he measured up and that his actions were his way of trying to make people see him. It was an unexpected turn, and for a moment there was just silence. My mom, torn between us, broke down. She apologized for not realizing how much this rivalry had hurt us both, saying she just wanted to see us both happy and successful. Seeing her like that, visibly shaken, made the room feel heavier, as if all the years of tension had finally reached a breaking point. After some more back and forth, we agreed that we couldn't keep going like this. My dad suggested family therapy to work through these issues, something I didn't think my brother would go for. But to my surprise, he agreed, although he looked reluctant. We scheduled our first session, hoping it would help us rebuild trust and maybe get past this long-standing resentment. The therapist recommended setting clear boundaries between my brother and me, advising us to take time apart to process everything. She suggested we each reflect on times we'd felt overshadowed or hurt in the family dynamic. For homework, we were supposed to list these moments so we could discuss them later, ideally to gain some perspective and work through the resentment. It felt odd to put everything into a list, but I could see where she was coming from. Our first therapy session was tense. My brother remained defensive, almost dismissive of the therapist's questions, as if he was doing everyone a favor by even showing up. I tried to stay open, but it was difficult to trust that he was taking any of it seriously. The therapist could see the tension, giving us both time to speak, but my brother kept circling back to how he never felt seen in the family. When it was my turn, I pointed out how his actions constantly pulled attention away from anything important in my life, and that's when the conversation grew more intense. After that session, I updated Reddit again, sharing how exhausting it was to finally voice everything in front of my family, but how validating it felt at the same time. People commented, saying they could relate, that family therapy had helped them, and that I was brave for speaking up. It felt good to see their reactions and know that others had been in my shoes. As for the family dynamic, things remained strained, but at least I felt like we were moving in some direction, even if it was uncomfortable. With therapy in place, my parents started seeing how deep the problem went and realized they had played a part in it too. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but for the first time it felt like the drama wasn't being brushed under the rug. Update 4. Not long after our family therapy session, my brother decided to take things to social media. He posted this long, vague story hinting at betrayal and pain within the family. He talked about feeling misunderstood, painted himself as someone struggling with deep emotional wounds and never named names, but it was obvious who he was talking about. The comments flooded in. People who knew both of us were quick to jump in, offering sympathy, telling him to stay strong, and saying they were there for him. A few even mentioned how family should be supportive, which felt like a thinly veiled jab at me. Soon enough, I started getting messages from family friends, implying I was in the wrong and should support my brother during this time. Some reached out to my parents too, expressing their sympathy for my brother, saying it must be hard for him to feel so alone. It didn't take long for the entire situation to feel twisted, with me coming across as the uncaring one. The sense of isolation crept in as even people I'd known for years seemed to side with him without knowing the full story. After one too many messages, I confronted my brother. I asked him why he felt the need to make things public and why he was manipulating the story to make himself look like the victim. He didn't deny posting but claimed he just needed support and couldn't understand why I was getting so upset. I couldn't believe how easily he brushed it off, as if the posts were harmless and I was overreacting. I started wondering if he even realized or cared how much his actions were affecting everyone around him. In the next therapy session, I brought up the social media drama. The therapist listened and then suggested that stepping back from social media could be a good idea for both of us. She explained that it was only adding fuel to the fire, keeping the focus on who's right or wrong instead of helping us actually work through our issues. My dad later tried to get my brother to take down the posts, pointing out that it was hurting more than helping. But my brother was adamant. He said he needed his own voice and didn't think he should have to hide his feelings. With all the tension, my brother and I barely spoke. When we did, our conversations were short and filled with resentment. The silence grew, and I could feel the strain affecting everything. Then, the real fallout hit. We were supposed to have a graduation party, a small celebration I'd hoped would be a chance to finally mark my achievement with close family. But a few extended family members canceled last minute, saying they didn't want to come with everything going on. The underlying message was clear. They didn't want to pick sides in this family mess. The isolation stung, but I found support where I didn't expect it. My friends, who'd been there from the start, and even a few people from Reddit, kept me grounded. They reminded me that it was okay to take care of myself first and encouraged me to focus on setting boundaries instead of constantly getting sucked back into the drama. This support made a huge difference, helping me stay level-headed even as things got more complicated at home. Back in therapy, my brother continued to play up his side of the story. He talked about feeling like he was under pressure to perform, always trying to meet the family's expectations. He said he felt unnoticed unless he did something big, which he used as an excuse for his behavior. To him, all his past actions were part of a misguided attempt to gain recognition. I sat there listening but couldn't shake the feeling that he was manipulating the narrative again, painting himself as the misunderstood victim. The therapist challenged both of us to start accepting accountability. She pointed out how easily we fell into the cycle of one-upmanship, each trying to prove we were the one who deserved attention. She encouraged us to start by identifying ways we could break that cycle, starting with small, everyday interactions. My brother nodded along, but I wasn't convinced he was taking any of it seriously. His past behavior had left me wary, and I could tell from the way he spoke that he was still focused on making himself look sympathetic. At home, I began setting clear boundaries. I decided to limit interactions with my brother, avoiding unnecessary arguments and refusing to engage in any more confrontations. If he wanted to keep stirring up drama, I didn't have to be a part of it. The distance felt necessary, even if it wasn't easy. I spent more time with friends, who reminded me that it was okay to take a step back and look after myself. Finally, I updated Reddit again, sharing everything that had happened since the last post. People commented with their own stories and advice, and the support kept me going. Some of them suggested ways to keep my peace, like focusing on my future and finding activities outside the family. Others urged me to stay strong and not let my brother's antics pull me down. I realized how emotionally draining it all was and expressed doubts about whether true reconciliation with my brother was even possible. As for my family, they were still trying to hold things together. My dad occasionally tried to mediate, hoping things would settle down, but I could see he was just as tired as I was. My mom, caught in the middle, still tried to support both of us, although it was clear the situation was wearing on her. I knew things couldn't go on like this forever, but for now I was focused on setting limits and taking care of my own well-being. Update 5. In one of our final therapy sessions, something shifted. My brother was more reserved than usual, not rushing to defend himself or twist the story. When the therapist asked him to talk about how he really felt growing up, he paused for a long time. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, he admitted that he'd always thought of me as the golden child. He explained how he'd felt overshadowed, resentful, and jealous, watching me get what he saw as our parents' admiration and respect. He went on, admitting that he'd been desperate to gain attention in his own way, even if it meant doing something drastic. He even admitted to faking the fainting episode at my graduation, staging the whole act out of a feeling of insecurity. Hearing that confession, I sat in silence, processing the words. It was a strange moment. I felt a sense of relief that he finally recognized the impact his actions had on me, but anger lingered too, wondering why he'd done so much damage just to feel seen. After the session, my brother came up to me alone, offering a quiet, hesitant apology. He acknowledged how much he'd hurt me over the years, admitting that he'd been so focused on himself that he hadn't realized the weight of his actions. The apology felt different this time, genuine, not another way to shift blame or twist the narrative. He didn't try to justify his actions, just said he was sorry. Over the next few weeks, our family made a concerted effort to heal. My dad was especially careful to pay attention to both of us equally, celebrating each small achievement without comparing. My mom still seemed torn at times, but she was making an effort too, to ensure we each felt valued. Slowly, things started to improve. For the first time, our family was committing to showing up for each other without competition. My brother also made some changes. He began to pull back from social media, eventually deleting the posts he'd made about his struggles. The constant online updates and attention-seeking behavior stopped, and our parents seemed relieved. They decided as a family that we'd keep things more private from now on, agreeing that airing personal matters online had only fueled the conflict. It felt like a small but important fresh start. A couple of weeks later, my family planned a small, intimate celebration for my graduation. It wasn't big or flashy, just a simple dinner at home. But this time it felt right. My parents made a toast, acknowledging my hard work, and my brother quietly congratulated me, adding that he was proud of me. It was the kind of moment I'd wanted from the beginning, a small acknowledgement of everything I'd worked for, without drama or distractions. For the first time in a while, I felt seen by my family, genuinely and openly. Over time, I started feeling a newfound sense of confidence. Therapy had taught me the importance of setting boundaries, and I decided to keep some distance between my brother and me. I realized I could care for him without letting him affect my peace. I didn't need to constantly monitor his reactions or worry about his approval. This change in perspective made a big difference, and I began to prioritize my own well-being more actively. My brother, meanwhile, started exploring interests outside of the family. He joined a local sports team and picked up some new hobbies. He was finding ways to define himself without needing constant validation from us. It was good to see him invest time in something other than family drama, and it seemed like he was learning how to stand on his own. Therapy encouraged him to focus on his own growth, and gradually I noticed he was more at ease, less focused on competing with me. As a family, we began holding monthly check-ins to stay on top of things and prevent misunderstandings. The talks weren't always easy, but they allowed us to clear the air regularly and avoid the buildup of resentment. My parents were especially committed to these discussions, eager to support both of us without feeding into any rivalries. The dynamic wasn't perfect, but it was healthier than it had ever been. I posted one final update on Reddit, sharing how things had turned out. I thanked everyone who'd supported me through the ordeal, expressing my gratitude for the advice, encouragement, and shared stories. Looking back, I realized how much the Reddit community had helped me feel less alone, giving me the push I needed to stand up for myself and set boundaries. A few months later, I decided it was time for the next big step, moving out. I wanted my own space, a chance to grow independently without constantly being drawn back into the family's issues. When I told my family, they were supportive, and surprisingly, my brother seemed genuinely happy for me. On the day I moved, he even came by to help, offering a sincere good luck and telling me he hoped I'd do well in my new chapter. It wasn't something I'd expected from him, but it felt like he was letting go of his own insecurities, at least for the moment. Living on my own gave me the freedom to reflect on everything that had happened. I still cared about my brother, and while I wasn't fully ready to trust him, I knew I'd come to a place where I could be at peace with our complicated relationship. I could move forward, knowing I'd done my best to address the past, and I finally felt a sense of closure. In my last Reddit update, I shared my reflections. I explained that while things were still complicated, I was ready to face the future without the baggage I'd carried for years. Thanks to therapy, my support system, and even the tough lessons with my family, I had learned to stand up for myself, set boundaries, and prioritize my own peace.